We are going to be kicking off our second session with Dr. Wendy Lauer. So, Dr. Lauer.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me in the back? Yes. Oh, it's great to see students here. I can relate to you at this very moment. I am a student of this topic. I just started to look into the history of Arthur Szyk in a more serious way earlier this year, kind of starting last fall, so that we could prepare for this opening event or this museum exhibition and my contribution to the volume. So I'm just saying that as a newbie that, yeah, I appreciate your critical feedback, your corrections. I'm going to raise some questions that I can't answer. And so this is my kind of exploration of Arthur Szyk, the artist, his hometown in Łódź, Poland. I am kind of by training a historian of the Holocaust. And a lot of my work focuses on on Ukraine, so it's close to this history as well. I did notice in my initial research into this, I started to get a better grasp of what kind of literature is out there. And the reason why I picked this topic was because I realized that there's still a lot to learn about Arthur Szyk's hometown, not so much during the Holocaust, but specifically what happened to his family he left behind, and also the pre-Holocaust years, his youth in Łódź and what his family life was like. Fame and memory do not go hand in hand. This is what one journalist reported from Łódź, Poland in 2022 after a futile search in the city for any memory of this famous Lodz-born artist Arthur Szyk, born in 1894. He died in 1951. You can see that on the screen. If you go to Łódź today, there are no visible statues, plaques, or street names honoring this renowned illustrator, caricaturist, and highly decorated Polish patriot who received the Golden Cross of Merit in 1931. His name does not appear in the tourism literature published by the city of Łódź, including a colorful pictorial history that touts its multi-ethnic roots and notable figures. I think this memory loss may actually be restored as more Polish academics, as well as journalists, I've started to recognize Szyk in his Łódź years, which he fondly spoke of as his turbulent youth. In fact, the decision to exhibit this Fairfield University's In Real Time, Arthur Szyk, Artist and Soldier for Human Rights, that will be traveling back to Poland, all of his work, some of his work I think that originated there, but I'm not sure actually, but it's fascinating to think of this Polish-born artist, Jewish artist, going back to his hometown. How is the local population going to respond to that? So that's another promising indication that his fame may return. Also, my work that I've endeavored to do on his Polish roots, what was known as the Manchester of Europe, textile factory town, that may hopefully start something, and many of the students in the room may choose to do more work on this. Szyk referred to his hometown as a place he felt connected to with 1,000 threads. And I liked that reference because, as I'm going to show you in a moment, a lot of his work has this kind of textured, textile-based look to it and all that intricacy. For most of his life, Szyk self-identified as a Pole and a Jew. His father, Solomon, had migrated to Poland from the Russian Empire to secure a better life, and succeeded. He directed a factory and then founded a family business with his two brothers until he died in the early 1920s. Szyk's mother, Eugenia, managed the household and cared for Arthur and his younger brother, Bernard. She was also known for opening the home to the needy, and her charity made a strong impression on young Arthur, who fought for the most vulnerable and oppressed his entire life. From an early age, Arthur loved to draw portraits, entertaining guests at their home and people on the street. He recreated biblical scenes inspired by the intricate weaves and bright colors of the textiles and tapestries that surrounded him. As a child, he was known for his drawings, but he was also a rascal. He actually was, at an early age, drawing unflattering caricatures of the Tsar, for instance, which got him expelled from his first school, a Russian trade school. At the Trade School of Merchants and Assembly in Łódź, he fared better. The teachers selected him to represent the school at an art exhibition, and this successful debut convinced his parents to send him to the Académie Julian in Paris at the age of 15 years old. He returned back to Poland in 1912, returned home, but he had been sending his art back, including caricatures, from France to Łódź. At 18 years old, he took over the artistic direction of the weekly magazine Smycz, which means laughter in Polish. And in this sarcastic, critical commentary of local politics and scandals, Szyk liked to poke fun at dignitaries and capitalists. Some of his depictions of Jewish leaders mimicked the common anti-Semitic tropes and shocked readers, which was his point. He also warned of the anti-democratic xenophobia of Polish nationalism, which we heard about in the earlier presentation today, portraying Dąbrowski as a, quote, self-proclaimed king. Although pre-World War I Łódź, thank you, fell within the imperial realm of Russia's Congress Poland, Polish culture dominated in this multi-ethnic industrial boomtown that drew fortune seekers, investors, master weavers, and laborers. During the 19th century, Jews founded publishing houses and bookstores, financed the first tram system, and managed more than 100 factories. The population expanded to 506,000 people, becoming one of the larger cities in Europe. Poles comprised 49%, Jews 34%, Germans 14.8%, and Russians at 1%. The shopping boulevard, Ulica Piotrowska, bustled with gabardine-suited salesmen surrounded by advertisements and newspaper stands in Polish, German, and Yiddish. The Łódź Tagblatt, the Volksblatt, these popular Yiddish newspapers, portrayed the Łódź Mensch as a go-getter, a cunning businessman. Each ethnic group had its separate neighborhoods and religious houses. The waves of pogroms that engulfed the Russian Empire struck Łódź in 1905 and 1907, the latter in the context of a workers' strike, inflamed by a bogus leaflet alleging that Jews were calling for the destruction of Christian churches and the murder of the clergy. I mention this because Szyk's father, Solomon, was assaulted with acid that left him blind when Arthur was just 11 years old. Arthur Szyk believed that this anti-Semitism was not inherently Polish, but had been stoked from outsiders, at this time Russians, but later the Germans in World War I and World War II, whom he believed all sought to weaken and destroy Poland. Despite the Tsar's policies of Russification and suppression of independent political parties, Poles, Jews, and Germans organized into various movements and philanthropic endeavors. Middle-class Jews, like the Szyk family, aligned themselves with the Poles and pursued assimilation, while others looked to the Holy Land and joined the Zionist movement. The working class pinned their hopes on socialist reforms and representation in the Bund. The Jewish question generated many answers for Jews and non-Jews alike and created more cleavages across society. The most wealthy and Orthodox in Łódź sustained the community in various ways. Here we have a picture of Israel Poznański, who was born in 1833 and died in 1900, probably the most famous of the wealthy Jewish industrialists. Also in the textile industry, he built urban palaces, neo-Baroque palaces, with Venetian mosaics and ornate facades similar to the Vienna secessionists. The Poznański Palace, actually, his home actually survived. It is the City Museum, the City History Museum in Łódź today. You can still see it as standing. Many of these former palaces did survive and have been now used in Poland as kind of civic institutions. Szyk was a beneficiary of such philanthropy. The prominent Hazimir Literary and Musical Society sponsored his tour of Palestine and the Near East in 1914. And this trip transformed Szyk's politics and aesthetics as he embraced Zionism and the Orientalism of Jewish art at this time. His travels through the Ottoman Empire and to Palestine coincided with the start of the First World War. He had to go back to Poland in 1914, was drafted into the Russian army to fight against the Germans at the Battle of Łódź. Experiencing that defeat, he left the army and endured most of the war under German occupation, First World War, where he was able to continue his work. In 1916, he presented his experiences in his current drawings of the war period. This was an exhibition of satirical cartoons and classic miniature paintings that was displayed at this grand hotel in Łódź. This was the same year that he married Julia Likerman, 1897 and 1974. I think she was also in the theater business and maybe working on costumes, and they met there. They would soon have 2 children, George and Alexandra. In her unpublished memoirs, Mrs. Julia Szyk wrote about their courtship. He recalled Arthur's courage vis-a-vis the German occupiers, how he had confronted the Germans with a formal letter requesting that they not confiscate his father Solomon's factory. During the occupation, the Germans introduced more direct administrative control over Jewish organizations and reduced the autonomy of the Jewish community. This is already in World War I. The golden age of Jewish economic prosperity ended decades before the Holocaust. In 1919, Szyk depicted these darker economic trends and social divisions in a series of cartoons printed on postcards. In the aftermath of the First World War and the origins of the Second Polish Republic during the Great War, which was established in 1921, there was a fight for independence. The war wasn't over for Poles because of the rise of Bolshevism and the attempt by the Reds to overtake Poland. Szyk fought in these battles. He reached the rank of lieutenant colonel in the cavalry. During his service, he witnessed violent anti-Semitism. Oh, here's the Great Synagogue, also financed in large part by Poznański, which was burned in 1939. It was the largest structure in Łódź at the time when it was built. And you can see from this postcard the different languages, the fact this was indeed a multi-ethnic, multicultural city. Here's a propaganda poster that Szyk contributed to the effort to defeat the Bolsheviks. He attacked the enemy already now with his pen and sharp wit. So at this point, we're seeing this transition, I think, in Szyk from he actually experienced military service, and now he's putting his artistry to work for what's going to be the Second Polish Republic. This particular one, someone's going to have to help me with the Polish translation. It looks like it's kind of go forward, advance.
Everybody to the front.
Everybody to the front. Thank you. Thank you. When peace came to Poland in 1921 and the Second Republic was established, Szyk left for Paris. Okay, so he did not stay in his hometown really much during the interwar period. He came back on the occasion of his own exhibits in the late 20s and the early 30s. His 1932 dedication of his painting, which we heard about extensively this morning, the statue of Kalisk to Marshal Pilsudski, was a very important event in showing his allegiance to Pilsudski. And Pilsudski, we heard about this morning, this legendary war hero who held fast to the multi-ethnic Polish state against the increasing Polish xenophobia and discrimination against the Jews. So while Szyk is not residing in Łódź in the 1930s, I just want to mention very briefly that what was kind of going on within the Polish community at that time. The most prominent leader was a gentleman by the name of Jakob Leib Mintzberg, a pious man with a modern flair who, like Szyk, admired the Polish statesman Pilsudski, observed Polish holidays, sang the anthems, and urged all Jews to do the same. When Pilsudski died in 1935, anti-Jewish violence increased in Łódź. 5 bombings and several murders occurred in 1936 alone, triggered by the Polish parliament's law regulating Jewish ritual slaughter, what Mintzberg called, quote, a local version of the Nuremberg laws. As war seemed imminent in 1939, the Polish government's plans for evacuating the city excluded the Jewish leadership. Polish-Jewish solidarity reached a low point just when Stalin and Hitler invaded in September 1939. Szyk believed that a Polish-Jewish brotherhood could defend Poland, since most Yiddish-speaking Jews still considered Poland to be their nationality. But this was not how Poles perceived them. Indeed, Polish officers told patriotic Jewish volunteers to go home with comments such as, "We don't want traitors in the Polish army." When the war started, Szyk was in London, where he advocated for Poland in every imaginable way. Łódź was also a special place in the eyes of the Nazi occupiers, who marched into the town on September 9th, greeted by the local population of cheering Germans. Hitler actually stopped to acknowledge them a few days later. The Wehrmacht encircled the Polish army, and the Luftwaffe waged a major aerial attack. 40,000 Polish prisoners were taken, and this defeat marked the downfall of the Polish state. Hitler annexed the region directly to the Reich and renamed it Litzmannstadt, honoring General Karl Litzmann, who had conquered the city in the Great War. He was a veteran of the Battle of Łódź in 1914, and so I kind of imagine that Szyk would have recognized that name. And if Szyk had remained in Łódź, he would have been among the Jewish men who were forced to drill holes and dismantle statues of Polish patriots, like his beloved Kosciuszko, whom he painted to international acclaim. He might have witnessed the burning of the grandest synagogues in Poland. He might have been seized for forced labor, his property confiscated, his dwellings plundered. Szyk's paintings might have been taken or destroyed. Perhaps Nazi rulers would have exploited his talent by forcing him to paint their own portraits. This may have saved him or not. While Hitler's deputy, SS and police chief Heinrich Himmler, embarked on resettlement programs to Germanize the region, in Łódź proper, the Nazi governor Arthur Greiser and local SS and police forces established the first major Jewish ghetto in Nazi-occupied Europe. In 1939, there were 227,000 Jews in Łódź. It was the second largest urban population of Jews in Europe. Escorted by a newly formed Jewish police force, Szyk's mother and brother joined the rest of the population consigned to the city's slums in an area less than 1 square mile. Besides a bed, each person was allowed to bring one suitcase containing clothing and linens and photographs. Eugenia, his mother, and Bernard lived in the Marieson neighborhood of the city. The first ghetto was also among the last. For more than 4 years, until autumn 1944, the population was decimated through starvation, disease, and mass gassing in the Nazis' first stationary killing centers for Jews at Chełmno, 30 miles northwest of Łódź. Along with Polish Jews, the Łódź ghetto received Roma and Jews from Western Europe, many of whom were in the final transports sent to Auschwitz in August 1944. The controversial Jewish elder and self-styled king of the Jews, Mordechai Rumkowski, could not save his Jews or himself and perished with them. This notorious collaborator victim became the central figure in Auschwitz survivor Primo Levi's account of the gray zones of Holocaust history. According to wartime documents from the Łódź Ghetto Administration, which I received from Steve Luckert and colleagues at the Holocaust Museum, thank you, on September 10th, 1942, Szyk's mother, Eugenia, was deported to Chełmno. She went with her Polish maid, who refused to abandon her. They were part of a wave of mass murders in early September, when Chaim Rukowski, the Jewish leader of the ghetto, declared on September 4th famously, quote, "A grievous blow has struck the ghetto. They are asking us to give up the best we possess, the children and the elderly. I must carry out this difficult and bloody operation. I must sever the limbs to save the body." After declaring a lockdown, German SS and criminal police searched and shot hundreds on the spot who resisted. Close to 16,000 were shoved into freight cars and sent to Chełmno, arriving at the killing center in trucks from the local station. Szyk's mother, among others, entered this manor estate, passing through high fences to a large house that served as the reception area, where SS and police ordered the Jewish victims to undress and relinquish their valuables. The Germans announced, "You are all going to labor camps and need to shower first." They brought the naked prisoners to the cellar, then guided groups of 50 to 70 persons to a loading ramp and onto a large truck, sealed the doors, and started the engine to pump carbon monoxide through a tube into a truck cabin, asphyxiating the victims. The Nazis murdered at least 172,000 Jews in Chełmno between December 41 and July 44. We can imagine how his mother suffered, but the details concerning the fate of Arthur's younger brother, Bernhard, are not known. Oh, here's an image. You can see the entrance to the ghetto here, Wohngebiet. This is a living district, only Jews. So this is the section that's going to block off the Jews from that district. Sorry. Also, these are some famous color images from the Łódź ghetto. Heinrich Ross, it's astounding. The ghetto administration employed a lot of photographers, so we have incredible images from the Łódź ghetto, and there's fascinating stories about how some of these have turned up. This is this very rare document from the ghetto administration records. This is a very blurry photo of Arthur's younger brother. In October 1940, as we see in this document, he applied for a new identification card, presenting himself as an office worker, and attached a small photograph which was stamped with the seal of the elder of the Jews, Litzmannstadt Ghetto. It seems that Bernhard perished in 1943 at 45 years old, since his name also appears on an address list of ghetto inhabitants dated 28th of December 1942, but there's no subsequent address and no additional information. He may have died in the ghetto or was deported to another nearby labor camp. I have yet to determine this. Meantime, Arthur Szyk is in New York, feverishly drawing and advocating, having just heard the news confirm the State Department and Jewish leaders that the Nazis were committing mass murder and its center was in Poland. Szyk's artwork Tears of Rage epitomizes this acute period of discovery and defiance in late 42, early 43. His mother had already been gassed in Chełmno in September 42, but he did not know this. What did Szyk imagine? In 43, a few months later, he drew a cover for the Łódź Yizkor book. These are memorial books that are put together by those survivors in those communities to pay tribute to them, showing these refugee figures of a mother and son that he had portrayed in 1940. And I wonder to what extent in this cover for this book he was actually paying tribute to his brother and his mother. The Yizkor book's purpose was to remember and document these lost Jewish communities. About this time, though, he wanted to reach another audience. So that Yizkor memorial book was really to pay tribute to those Jewish communities. And then he turned and published this image for the broader American public, a cover from 43 called We're Running Short of Jews, returning to his popular caricatures of Hitler, Goering, Goebbels, and Himmler, seated at a table while Himmler points to a document titled The Murder of 2 Million Jews, and in the upper right corner, Szyk added a prominent tribute here, because I'm always kind of on the search for any mention of the family and to what extent he knew what was going on. It says up there, and you can see the word mother is in bold, to the memory of my darling mother, murdered somewhere in the ghettos of Poland. This was followed by a post-war tribute published in a biblical book series he illustrated. This is the Cohen's Pathways Through the Bible that was published in 1946. I should mention, too, that as far as Szyk's interaction with the broader American public and that kind of mass media, whether it's Collier's or PM and these outlets, it's interesting how he positions himself in his relationship to Łódź, his hometown. Already in 1941, in the Collier's image, it's on display in the exhibit, which you should all go to, he writes in a letter to the readers, you can see this up in the exhibit, I just discovered it yesterday, he self-identifies, he says, I am a Polish exile. He doesn't say he's Jewish. I am a Polish exile from Łódź, which is now in German hands, right? So that's the only time I really could see him call out his hometown in that bigger way, in the bigger press. But in this introduction to this multi-volume series, Pathways Through the Volume, again, he refers back to Łódź and specifically to his mother. And he writes, in March 1943, my beloved 70-year mother, Yevgeny Szyk, was taken from the ghetto of Łódź to the Nazi furnaces of Majdanek. With her voluntarily went her faithful servant, the good Christian Józefa, a Polish peasant. Together, hand in hand, they were burned alive. In memory of the two noble martyrs, I dedicate my pictures of the Bible as an internal Kaddish for these great souls. She was not killed in Majdanek, as I mentioned, it was in Chełmno, but how could he figure this out? How could he figure out the details of the fates of his loved ones? Determining the fate, and this is my conclusion, of the missing, when the paper trail was thin or non-existent, took time and efforts that spanned continents and the involvement of myriad agencies. Relatives such as Szyk constantly searched and worried about those left behind. They posted notices in newspapers, wrote letters to international and local authorities, and inquired with former neighbors. But the success rate for determining the fate of the missing was not high. For Jewish organizations in New York, less than 20%. The German Jewish newspaper Aufbau, popular among emigres in New York, served as an outlet for this effort, publishing lists of missing relatives, missing Jews, as well as obituaries honoring the murdered and documenting their existence and fate. Over time, relatives gave up their searches as they realized that a mother, a sister, a brother, a father, a child was among the millions murdered. Their loved one was no longer findable. When did the missing, as one scholar said, become the perish? When did the tunnel of grief begin? At the height of his fame and with the extensive connections to Polish Jews and government officials, Szyk was not able to obtain more information, or perhaps he chose not to pursue what was irretrievably gone. When Szyk died of a heart attack in 1951, he had just been summoned by HUAC with the accusations of communism. Scholars have suggested a causal relationship. I contend that another contributing factor was the shock and loss that he experienced as a Polish Jewish remnant of his hometown of Łódź. Thank you.